Hello again. In this lecture, we're going to continue where we left off in the last lecture, working with selections. Primarily, we'll work with the Select by Location tool, a close relative of the Select by Attributes tool that instead allows us to select things by how they relate to other features in our map document. To start, I'd like to say that I think that the Select by Location tool is incredibly powerful. It's a really basic function of a GIS, but it's also one that lots of people don't know about. I regularly encounter people in my in-person classes who are intermediate GIS users or sometimes even advanced, and they don't know about the Select by Location tool. And they say, I really wish I'd known about that a long time ago. It would have saved me a lot of time in my workflows. So just pay attention to this one because it's a basic tool. It's really easy to use, and you'll find yourself using it all the time if you rely on feature data in your work. To start with though, we'll use the Select by Attributes tool again to subset our data to use for a Select by Location tool. You don't have to do this, it's just part of this example. So I'm going to collapse the WBD subwatershed layer, and I'll turn on the counties layer, and that way we'll see the counties in the background. And let's just turn off the rivers for a moment so we can take a look at things. And now let's use the Select by Attributes tool again to find a county of interest, or maybe even two counties of interest. So up here at the top, we'll choose the layer counties instead of rivers this time, and we're going to create a new selection still. And what I want to do is I want to find a county where the name is equal to, let's go to Los Angeles, which maybe some of you are more familiar with than the areas I've been focusing on. So Los Angeles, and since Los Angeles County is kind of small, we'll use a nearby county as well. So we'll say where the name is Los Angeles, or where the name is equal to San Bernardino County. So I'll click apply, and you'll notice nothing's selected. So if I didn't know where these were, I'd right click and go selection, zoom to selected features again. And I can see that it takes me to this southern area of California here. So I have Los Angeles County here and San Bernardino County here. So now, what if in looking at these two counties, I was wondering what watersheds are a part of these two counties? I could use interactive selection and really slowly go around the edges here and make sure that I selected everything. But the easiest way, now that I have a selection of these two counties active, is to go to Selection, Select by Location. And the Select by Location dialog pops up, and it allows me to do a really similar thing to the Select by Attributes dialog. I could select features from, or I could add to currently selected features, remove, etc. But I choose the target layer, the layer that I'm going to select from. So in this case, I'm going to select from the subwatershed layer. And the source layer is the layer that we're relating that to. So if I select the counties layer, which is the layer I have a selection on, I can then choose the Use Selected Features option down here, and it says 15 features selected. And this says that when figuring out the relationship between the subwatershed layer and the counties layer, only take a look at these selected features. And again, that's kind of our selection default usually, is if we have a selection active, it acts as if the layer that has the selection is only composed of the selected features. So the counties layer is only made of the selected features right now, as far as this tool is concerned. And now we can then choose the relationship that it's going to assess them by. So it says spatial selection method for target layer features, which is kind of a cryptic way of saying, how do you want them to relate for me to create this new selection? And by default, it just says if they intersect, which is if they're overlaid in any way. If one of them kind of touches the other one, then it's going to select the new feature. So the sum total of this is that it's going to give me a new selection of all of these watersheds in here that are within or touching the edges of these two counties that I have selected here. So I can click apply, and I'll take it a moment, and I get a selection of all these watersheds now. And just to kind of prove it again, I'll go to the subwatershed layer and open the attribute table, and I have a selection of 609 watersheds here, and I can go through them and take a look at all of their information. At this point, I could also, if I was going to use this data for a project, say I'm doing this at the beginning of a project working in these two counties, and I just want a layer of these watersheds to work with that isn't as cumbersome as the whole state, I can now right click on this and I can go to Data, Export Data. And by default at the top here, when I'm exporting my data, it only wants to export the selected features. I could export all features, but it chooses to only export the selected ones, and I can create a new layer in this geodatabase called LA and San Bernardino watersheds and export it. And it asks me if I want to add it to the map as a layer, and I'll say sure. And there we go. So let me clear this selection, and I have this new layer of watersheds that are only in those counties. To clarify a potential difference between what we did here and what we did in one of the previous demos, I want to say in the past we had a selection and I right-clicked on it and said, I used the option create layer from selected features, and it created a layer up here. I didn't have to export it out anywhere. That's only a temporary layer that lives in the map document while it's open, and if I close the map document, it's gone. Whereas what I just did in terms of exporting the data to a geodatabase, that's permanent. That layer is going to be there until I delete it manually, and I can work with it, I can update it, and I can do all sorts of things with it. Whereas that temporary layer just references back a few of those selected items to the original data set. So let's turn that off for now again. And let's go back in and take a look at select by location, because there's a lot more there. That really simple feature is really powerful to me because we just figured out a relationship between watersheds and counties in a really easy way. We didn't have to do anything too complicated to do that, but there's a lot more power in here. So if I go and select those two counties again, so I'll also bring up select by attributes, and I'm just going to run it again because the query is still there. So I'll click OK, bring those two counties back up. And down here at the bottom, we have all of these options for how their relationship should be defined. So we just did intersect before, but let's really quickly do a figure out which watersheds are within the counties. So not just touching the edges, but that they're entirely within the counties. So we'll say are completely within the source layer feature here. So which target features in the subwatershed layer are completely within the source layer feature, the counties here, and I'll leave the use selected features checked again, and I'll click OK. And that probably looks really similar to last time, but if I turn on this other layer, we can see that a lot of these watersheds around the edges here are no longer selected. So we can really constrain our selection in different ways that allow us to get at exactly what we need. And I'll do just one more selection here. And I want to point out that in most cases, we can apply a search distance here. So maybe I want to know how many or which watersheds are even within 30 kilometers of the edges of those counties. So if I click OK now, it does a new selection. It's going to take a little bit of time. This is a more complicated selection for it. And it selects way outside of my selected area, but based upon how far I told it to search. So all of a sudden we have tons of options for figuring out these spatial relationships between our layers. And let's just take a quick look. I'm not going to run any more selections, but let's take a quick look at these other options here. So it'll do lots of different things for us. It'll find identical features. If they're made from the same data, it'll see where boundaries touch. And you can also figure out which ones have their centroid in the source layer, which is really useful sometimes for getting a tighter selection, one that maybe seems a little more representative, and also in some specific use cases, depending upon your workflows. Okay, so I'm going to close this out, and that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, I showed you how to use the Select by Location tool in order to find relationships between features in your map document. This is a really basic querying function of GIS, and it allows you to start doing analysis, really basic analysis with ArcGIS. I encourage you to check out selections on your own, play with it a little bit and see how it works. I think you'll have fun with them, and it's a great way to get some insight into your own data. See you next time.